Hello everyone, this is Nikita and thank you for joining me in this video. In this video, I wanted to discuss about how do we create a product rule in PEGA. So product rule mainly deals with deploying an application from one environment to the other. In PEGA, when we create an application or when we have any patch releases, some new rules got created and we have to move it to the higher environment, may it be a QA environment or a production environment, we need to follow some steps. So the process of that step, we need to create a product rule to be able to accommodate all the rules or all the data instances or all the schema changes that we have done in our development environment. So this is what I wanted to discuss in this video. So let us go on what are the key contents or key points we have to remember when we start with creating a product rule. So first of all, what is a product rule? It is basically a bundle wherein we add all the rules that we have created in our application and make sure that we include only those rules which we need to deploy, which we need to move to the higher environment rather than all of the rules that we have created in development environment. Because there may be some junk rules that may have been created by mistake. We have to make sure that we do not deploy all the rules that has been created. So the short form of product rule is also called RAP, which is a short form of rule admin product. It is a product rule is an instance of a rule admin product. That's why it is called a RAP. First of all, what are the things we have to remember? We should make sure that we lock all the rule set versions. Basically, rule set version should be locked when we move to the high environment. So that is a necessity. So we have to do that. But there is some production rule sets which we never lock it. So that if we have a necessity where we have to move some production rules, production rule sets, then we can keep it unlocked. Production rules are not moved ideally. The reason being it is something which can be updated in production. So if we keep moving them from the low environment to the high environment, what will happen is with the production rule would get overridden by our development rules, by our dev rules. So if it is a patch versions or any incremental changes, we have to make sure that we deploy only the rule set versions, not the production rule sets, unless it is required. When we are deploying our application newly, it is like a first application which we are deploying to our production, which is not an incremental change, then it is okay to move the production rule set also, because at that time the rules would not be present and the user would not have updated the rules in the production. So that's the only scenario where you should actually move the production rule sets also. And other thing to remember is data instances should always be tied to a rule set. There can be an exceptional circumstances wherein you do not want some of the data instances should to be moved because it was created only for the development environment. Then in that case, it's okay not to tie with any rule set. No downtime needed when we create the wrap, okay, and create the jar file and move that zip file is imported to the other environment. It is instantaneous. There is no downtime which is needed, and you can access the rule as soon as your zip file gets imported in your other environment. So that's the key points to remember. And now coming to what all are moved. So your rules gets moved, your classes gets moved, your data instances can be moved, your database schema changes are moved. Let me start with rules. Rules are basically all of this, right? Activity, data transform, all of these are rules. So how do we identify whether it is a rule or whether it is a class or whether it is a data instances? So let me go to my application and show you the differences between them. So coming to the rule, so rule can be anything like your property. Okay, so when you see your property, it is always tied to a rule set version, right? So this is the rule set XYZ bank and the version is O1 So this is a rule because it is tied to a rule set as well as a rule set version. Okay, so that's why it would be called a rule. So activity, data transform, property, I think all of these major things we use for development are all rules, okay, which follow rule resolution. Now coming to classes. What are classes? So let me open one of the classes. If I open this work class, go to right click, definition. So this is my class, okay. So you don't see any version in here, okay. So this is basically only tied to a rule set. That's why it is called a class, okay. If you want to see how the PGINS key of a class looks like, so if you don't know about PGINS key, so PGINS key is the primary key through which we can identify anything, be it class, be it rule, anything, okay. So let me go to action and then view XML and I can check the PGINS key of this rule. Control F, PGINS key. Okay, so what is the PGINS key of this particular class? It is rule obj class and then the class name. Okay, so it is called a class. How it is different? As I've told you, it is not tied to a rule set version. Okay, now coming to the third one, which is data instances. How do we identify a data instances? So the class I just showed you, it had rule obj class, right? It was derived from rule obj class. So it started from rule, that means it was a rule, not a data instance. So if it is a data instance, it should be derived from a data dash class. So what can be the example of a data instance? It can be access group, it can be dynamic system settings. Okay, let me show you one of them. Go to records. Okay, we can go to sysadmin and then dynamic system setting. Can open this dynamic system setting, open any of them. Okay, so what do you see in here? This is a dynamic system setting, okay, but how will you know that what is the class from which is this derived? Then you have to go to action, view XML and then PGINS key. Okay, so now you can see it is data admin system settings. So that means it is a data instance because it is derived from a data class. Okay, what is the speciality of a data instance? Again, it is not tied to a rule set version, it is only tied to a rule set. Okay, so here you see there is a PEGA engine, which is an out of the box rule set, but there is no version. Okay, so this is an example of a data instance. You can also see some of the others like access group. Okay, take any access group, just go to view XML, check the PGINS key. Here you see it is data admin operator access group. So it is also derived from data class. So it is also a data instance. A shortcut of checking a PGINS key would be Shift F8. Sorry. The shortcut would be Shift F8. Okay. So where you can see the PGINS key and copy it. Fine. So these were thing, and the other is database schema changes. Basically, whenever we optimize any property, so we are doing the schema changes, or when we create a concrete class, a data table gets created at the back end. So whatever the schema changes we are doing, whatever query we are firing internally has to be included in our product rule, in our product file, because that has also need to be because that has to be moved from the lower environment to the high environment for it to work correctly. So these are the things which are moved in our product rule. So let's get to our product rule now. So I'll show you two. One is the product rule when we are deploying our application for the first time, and the other one when we are going for an incremental change. Okay. So first application, first product rule. So here what we do is, let me first describe what is this. This is the product rule form. Okay, so here you give your contents, right? So this is the application. What your application is, you want to move to the high environment. You have to mention your application name here, your application version here. Okay, and then there are few other things. Let us go one by one. Okay, so basically include associated data. All the data instances which are there in your application, if you want to move it to the high environment, then you have to check in this. Then there is custom production rule set. Suppose there are some production rule set in your application and you want to move it to the high environment. Since it is a first deployment, you would need to deploy the production rule set, because the production rule set is not at all present in the high environment. So it has to be present for the user to update it in runtime. So yes, you have to do it if you are deploying for the first time. Then there is delta mode, wherein you just move the patch version. Then rule history. What happens is, if there are some history rules get generated whenever you create a rule, update a rule, so that's a lot of history to be moved. If you do that, you will just increase the load in the other environment. So it's better not to include rule history. Include data type. All the data types in your application would be moved to the high environment if you check in this. Okay, update dependent application is not that important. So that's what it is done. So let me show you one by one. By previewing the application, there is a provision of previewing the product rule. Okay, so when you preview the product file, you basically see what all things would be moved. Okay, so in my application, how many rule sets are there? All the rule set would be shown here. Even the test branch is coming, which I should be removing then for it to be correctly. You should not, you should never include any branch in your product rule. That should be a very bad practice. Okay. Coming to my, yes, preview. So there is no branch. Okay, so all the rule sets you can see here, right? Your class, your rule set name, your rule set version. Okay, all these are non-versioned rules. Okay, and then there is application of framework data. Whatever changes you have done in any framework or application, which you can include in here. Okay, then there is data instances and database schema changes. As I mentioned you, whatever query you have fired at the backend, right, which will be included here. So now you can see all the data was included, right? What if I remove this, include associated data, and check if my data has been included? So now you see that there is no data. Okay, there is only this data rule, but all the data instances which we were seeing, is not there right now. So that means with this you can remove the associated data. Okay, custom production rule sets I have checked in. If you remove it, the production rule set will not be included. Okay. Then there is include rule history. Okay, so what it does is includes a lot of junk history rules. So if you preview this now, you would see this history rule 571 instances will be included if you switch on this. So it's better to switch off. Okay, now there is include data type. If you want your data type to be included, then you can add this. Okay, so this was when you move your application for the first time. But suppose your application is already there in the production and you just have to do some incremental changes, right? Suppose in your sprint you have completed some of the work, or there's few changes you want to do in your application. Then you basically have to add rule sets, rules, classes, data instances, rather than the whole bundle of the application. Okay, so at that time what you have to do is, we will see that. Okay. So this is where we will not include the application. We will basically include the rule sets which we are changing. Okay. So here you have to add your rule set, whatever rule set you want to, you have the changes, right? Suppose you have only done changes in two of the rule set, then you can add in only two. So now what is the minimum version and maximum version? So minimum version is the minimum version, rule set version from which you want your deployment to happen till the maximum version. Suppose my this rule set XYZ bank contains two or three rule set version O1, O1, O1 to O1, O1, 10. Okay, and I want to include only O1, O1, 5 to O1, O1, 10. Okay, so what you can do is you just have to add in O1, O1, 5 and here O1, O1, 10. So only the rules between O1, O1, 5 to O1, O1, 10 will be included in your product file. Okay. For now, I think we have my rule set contains only, let me check my rule set. Yeah, it contains O1, O1, O1 and O1, O1, 2. Okay. I want to include O1, O1, O1 to O1, O1, 2. What if I don't give anything? What if I don't give the maximum version? It will go to my rule set and check what is the maximum version and it will take that. So it's okay if you don't include the maximum version also. Okay. What is exclude non-version rule? When you exclude non-version rule, then the rule set name, rule set version, all of these non-version rule would be excluded from your product file. So suppose now when I see that it has been excluded, I can go and check in my preview product file. Can I see my non-version rule? I can see classes, but do I see the non-version rule like rule set name, rule set version? No. So that's how it is excluded. Now coming to include associated data. So basically all the data instances, if you want to include in your product file, then you can check in this. And if you don't include it, then the data instances would be removed from your product file. Okay. Coming to the global exclusion. Global exclusion basically works like suppose you have added all the things about the rule set and all the rule sets and all, but you want to make sure that there are some type of rules or some type of things which are always excluded from your product file. Then what you can do is you can give this global exclusion which would take care of all these things. So suppose my class rule set version has been globally excluded. Now when I preview the product file, I will not see any class. Okay, see, I don't see any class. It's only application. So classes have been removed. So suppose you want to make sure that by mistake I don't include any class rule set version or anything like that in my product file, it's better to check this. Coming to class instances to include. So there are suppose there are classes which you want to include. What you do is you basically give your class and you can give your report definition filter and it will filter those instances and will give you this. So basically you will not be using these much, but the other thing which you need to note down is about the individual instances to include. Suppose there is a data class, okay, data class or work class, whatever it is. Suppose there is this class XYZ bank work interview. Okay, so this particular class contains so many instances. And suppose there is a requirement that I have to move one instance to the other environment. Okay, only one, or suppose any particular instance. So what I can do is I can go in here, I can just select this class, add it in here and then do a query. Okay, So when you query, you will be able to see all the instances. Okay, so you can select whichever you want. Suppose I want to include this instance in my product rule. So what happens at the background is when you do a query and check in one particular instance, the PGINS key of that instance gets added in here. Okay, so this is the PGINS key. Okay, now other thing to note down here is there may be requirement of just adding some particular rule to your product file. Okay, so that scenario, what you can do is you can just individually go to your rule or instance and add your PGINS key in here. You can add in here. So suppose there is a data table, database admin DB table, which you want to include here. Okay, this is only a particular rule you want to include. I mean the particular data instance you want to include. Other things remain as is. Suppose there are some 100 or 200 data instances in your application, but you do not need to move all of them to the high environment. There is only particular one data instance which you need to move. In that scenario, you need to go to that instance, go to that data instance and pull the PGINS key and add here. That will serve your purpose. Okay, let me show you how. I can go to record database table. Okay, suppose this is my database table. What I can do is shift F8. I got my PGINS key. I can go here and add this is my database table. I can write it here. So that's what my main intention was. I just had to add this data admin DB table. So this can be done. Suppose there is a very small change, okay, in your production, wherein you just had to add one instance or one database table. So what is the need of pulling everything in here? Okay, so this is just for small changes, and it's also done to make sure that you do not always send everything to the production. Okay, that's why it just restricts the deployment. So this is the basic things you would need to check in when you create a product rule. Okay, when you're ready for deployment. Now when you do a save and try to create the product file. So let me do that for you. Suppose this is my XYZ bank. XYZ bank. So it is opening it. In this archive created, right click, save link as, and then you need to save it in your wherever location you want to save. So the zip file got created. So this is the zip file which you would use to import it in the other environment. Okay, so for you to just give you a overview how does it happen, let me do one thing. Let me move to some other application for now and try to import my zip file. Okay, so now for importing, what you have to do is you have to go to configure, then application, then distribution, then import. Okay, so now you have to choose the file which you have just downloaded. Choose file. Okay, this is my zip file. Okay, so clicking on next. Okay, to tell you what this means is you're just importing your zip file and it gives you the details about the zip file, operator, artifact name, etc., etc. Okay, if you go to show content details, it will show you the content of the zip file. Okay, basically you can check this before you're sure you want to import. Okay, so this can be done. Now, when you do an advanced mode, enable advanced mode, it gives you some more functionality where you can check, you can check the granular details of the rules and the and your application, whether you want to move the rule or not. You can decide in there only. Okay. Now clicking on next. So now nothing is imported because my instance is same, and XYZ bank zip is this product file is already there in this application also, since loan application which I am currently in is also derived from, is also built on the XYZ bank application. But what happens is when you do this, it gets imported, and you can check in there in and what happens is when you import, first the database schema changes would be applied. It would show you that first database schema changes applied, and then your rules are imported. And after that is done, you can start seeing the rules in your application and you can do your work. So that's what the whole deployment process contains. It's very easy. Just you have to understand what the product rule contains and how you have to make sure that you only move the rules which are needed. So I think that's all for this video. Let me know if you liked my video, if you like this content or not. I would come again with a new video on other topic. Thank you so much for joining me in here. See you again in my next video. Till then, bye bye.